Okay, we got three. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hey, Nicole, how are you?
This was too long. It was too long. These 2 weeks were too long.
Well, some of you, I'm not sure. I can go back and look at my grades and who submitted what, but some of you evidently got busy real quick. I mean, a lot of work has been put up. Okay, we'll wait a few minutes and get to 7:00, 7:30, and we'll get started. Well, I think we're fairly close to 7:30. Why don't we start talking about some of the nuts and bolts of information going on that we need to be aware of and dealing with. One thing I want you all to do is to go back to your Blackboard page and look at under your grade center to see your grades that go from left to right. Now, I am recording this, and I'm going to post this video either when it gets through processing tonight or early in the morning. But I want you to make sure of the following information. I do want you to go back and review the first class that we had on May the 23rd and that memo. And basically the gist of that information, I want you to make sure that looking at left to right, that you have covered the 19 chapters out of that textbook at 2 points each. So that should be a total of 38 points. If you have any work missing, now, I need you to understand, I put in points for 4 of those chapters, but you still got credit for it. You were given 4 points for your EVA, and that basically tells the university that you're in the program. Then it got down to the point where you were supposed to have 4 written peer reviews, and those were 4 points each, or a total of 16. Then you were to have 4 Zoom peer reviews, and that's worth 4 points each, for a total of 16 points. Then I reminded you, if you haven't done your city training, while it wasn't critical for the completion of this course, it will stop you from getting your degree, because they will require you to have that training in order to do any form of research. And that's usually in the APTEL. That was worth 1 point. And then to submit a screenshot of your APTEL where you scored at least a 3 or higher, and that was worth 25 points. So you will end up having a total of 100 points. Now, right now, we do have one person who has earned their 100 points. There's nothing left for them to do, chapter work, or anything else. They've completed their EVA and their city training. But the rest of you are at different stages of completion. So look at that grade sheet going from left to right and double check to make sure what, if anything, you're missing. Now, one of you sent an email one time that there were 2 places for you to put work. And I said, that's no big deal. Just put it in one or the other. I'm not going to give you credit for doing one work and then putting it in 2 places. And I uncovered that I had did that today. But if you do everything that's asked of you, and of course the critical part is getting your APTEL and those 4 tasks within that APTEL finished off of your computer with your clinical coach's permission, thinking that those 4 tasks have been addressed, and get it off to have it, the evaluator look at it. Now, I'm thinking in terms of right now, I'm going to ask a question that I don't want you to answer. I just want you to think about. Number one, we've got about 23 days after today. 23 days. That's calendar days, not week, not school days, weekdays, weekend days. It's total 23 days. Now, I don't know, and I know you've been in communication with your clinical coach, or I think you would have been, but at some point in time, they're thinking within the last 5 to 7 days, your work should go to someone to have it evaluated, and then I think they're supposed to take a 3, give or take, plus or minus, day turnaround time to grade it, because you may, in fact, have to make some changes. I don't know what you did or didn't do when you did the APSL and how long that took, but you need to stay in touch with your clinical coach as to where you are and what you're doing. Is there anyone there? Is there anyone in our group that has gotten that stuff completed and submitted for an evaluation? Or are you wrapping up some loose ends? Or where are you right now? If you want to talk about it, and I'm not trying to be rhetorical, but where are you with that process? 23 days. I don't want you to come up short.
So I can say, just for our group, we have 2 more peer reviews to do, which are already scheduled. That'll happen on Sunday. From what I can tell, I think our group is doing they're pretty on top of it.
Okay. Now, I have noticed this, Nadine, and I appreciate the communication that we've had back and forth this week. When y'all are putting up a peer review, I'm pulling out the separate parts so I give credit to everybody who was doing that peer review, be it a Zoom or a written, because some of you started loading up where you had completed 2 or more written peer reviews, and I only gave you credit for 1. Well, I had to go back in my grade book and manually tweak that to give you full credit for everything that you had put up. But that's good that y'all are on target. Now, how about anybody not in communication, or you're thinking that's a good idea, where you need to be talking to your clinical coach about where you are with your work and finishing up the APTEL? And some of you have some, I've looked at the list. Some of them are on point. Some of them might be a little loose. But I don't think you would have been into any kind of trouble in the APSL. So I'm expecting the same kind of process in the APTEL. But it is, as I told you on that first night, it's only 10 weeks, not 15. It's tight. It's short. And there's a fast turnaround. So that's pretty critical.
Dr. Bowman.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I just have a question. My group is pretty on task. We're going to do task 3 Zoom conference tomorrow, so we only have task 4 left.
Okay.
We just need to know, what is the date that it has to be? The date
Nicole,
that has to be. Okay.
Nicole, I know exactly what you're going to ask. If you'll go back to that memo that I sent out on the 23rd, it was the 23rd, my grades have to go in by about noon, 11 o'clock on
August the 3rd.
Thank you. And it's an odd day of the week, too. It's like a Wednesday or a Thursday. They're due by me they say 12 o'clock, but I get all wigged out. I like them turned in about maybe 11 or 10. I had a breakdown one time where I had to go to a McDonald's and put in my grades at the last minute to get them in on time. So if you get everything finished by the 3rd, by 8 o'clock, no later than 9 o'clock, everything's lovely. Now, I will contact Dr. Neal and go, look, I do have some in this group who've not had their work evaluated. I got a couple of choices and asking for his recommendation. One is the one that I don't want to do, and that, of course, is we're talking 25 points now. That means that's either a C or a C minus, and I don't think you want that because that would put you in some kind of academic liability. But most importantly, I could do an incomplete, but then that means I have to do a contract, and you get so many days or weeks, I think it's actually weeks, to complete your APTEL. They sort of loan you some time while you're creating the third class, but it involves a contract and this kind of stuff and this kind of stuff if you don't meet that deadline for getting that grade for your APTEL back and taking that screenshot for me to see that you scored it. That's part of the rubric in the handbook for you to move forward from course 602 to 603, is that you do complete that APTEL. Years ago, and this was Jeff, if you don't mind me saying this, when Jeff was originally in the program, if you didn't keep up and you got behind, they didn't do anything. You just went on through and matriculated through 601, 2, 3. But when you got to 605, they brought in a hammer. And this person was charged with, okay, look, they need to pick up the tempo. They need to get all 5 of those things completed. They need to get them graded, and then they can walk across the stage. Well, they've said emotional-wise, financial-wise, getting everybody stressed out-wise, I mean, it came down to the last hours before graduation. They stopped that. So now they've decided at the end of each course, we call timeout. What's it going to take to get you back on track? And you tweak out 602 before you start 603, or as you're starting 603. So the rules have changed a little bit so that you don't get squeezed at the end of 605. That was horrible. It was horrible for the students. It was horrible for the professors, the university, and everyone. So, answer to your question, long story short is, I got to find out what Dr. Neal will tell me to tell you, and I need to hear it from Dr. Neal and not from a clinical coach. There's an interesting comment as to what he would suggest I tell y'all in an email from him. I don't like to make up stuff. I just like to keep, if he says something, I want to do it. I don't like making up stuff as I go. So we're shooting for early morning on the 3rd, Nicole.
Well, I was asking about task stream. So you're saying we got 23 days left. So do you want me to back it out 7? Have it?
I'd shoot for at least 5 to 6. If you got 23, I'd go for 18 to 20 to work on your 4 tasks inside the APTEL. That's you and your research, your writing, what you would plan to implement, those 4 pieces. And I think I may have said this, but if I haven't, let me repeat it or say it for the first time. Your goal as we get closer to those 23 days is to finish up those tasks, and then while your paper is on somebody's desk being evaluated, then you and your group can go back and finish your Zoom stuff, your peer review stuff, or whatever. It won't be as critical then. Okay, you go with the thing that counts the most right now, and that would be your APTEL. And I do realize that the APTEL is supported by your Zoom and written peer reviews, but I think by this stage of the game, you know what the group's going to tell you, critically comments. And I tell you, sometimes I get nervous reading those comments. Some of them are critical to the point, but the part that makes me put a positive spin on it is you give them suggestions as to what they need to be doing to correct what you see. And you can't fault somebody for that. Have you thought about this? I didn't see this. I don't see the connection between that. These are the things that I see when I see a written or I listen to y'all talking back and forth in the video for the Zoom. So focus on those 4 tasks within the APTEL. Then if you got time while they're grading it, then you pull back in the written and the peer review and the Zoom review. And then if you have any chapter stuff, the chapter work's only worth 2 points apiece. The APTEL's worth 25. Now, where would you put, if you're in Vegas, where are you going to put your money on? You're going to put your money on the 25-cent spot. Mm-hmm. Makes sense? Use your time wisely. Now, is anybody other than Nadine still teaching?
Working.
What you doing, Nicole?
Well, I got a job. I'm actually the assistant director, so I'm kind of at a A&T. I'm a summer camp director. So
are you part of that engineering school process that's going on?
No, I'm not that part of it. It's just Aggie Enrichment Camp.
Yes,
We've been doing it.
That's what was on. I've been watching that on the news about kids being.
Yeah, we was on the news the other day. Mm-hmm.
That was it. I saw that piece. I kept thinking that's a great idea, pulling those kids in for some positive, futuristic, what do you want to do when you get out of school kind of attitude. That's a great program.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Mr. McCray are working there this summer. So. Okay.
Well, for those still working, and I know you have more obligations than just work, if you got family and other things and children not in school, your life is still spinning. But just try to tweak out what you can, and I'll send Dr. Neal an email as to worst case scenario, what would he suggest? Okay? Any questions about the process, where we are, the timeline, and all that stuff?
I have a question, but it's a little beyond that.
Oh, well, shoot for it, Paula.
Okay, because I'm so looking forward to a break. I know everything is due August the 3rd, and I know between our first semester and this semester, we only had like a week and a half break.
Right.
Do you know the break after this semester or the dates for when the next semester starts?
I tell you what, when I post this video, I will put that, there should be a course calendar at Gardner Webb, but I'll go ahead and look it up and give it to you in that email.
Okay.
That's a great question. Great question. Y'all report back to work around the 18th, and the students start that first Monday. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I will give you the date as to when that week of the first class. And I would assume whoever is assigned for 603, which is traditionally school law and school finance, they would sort of fall in line and coincide with Tuesday night as the night that y'all sort of got in motion to maintain that process. I mean, I didn't see any to upset in the cart. I just thought to go with Tuesdays.
Right.
Yeah,
I looked up the date. And if I'm not mistaken, we start August 28th.
August the 28th. What day of the week is that on, Nadine?
That's a Monday, the first day of school.
All right, then your first class, if your professor picks that Tuesday, sounds like the 28th when kids start.
Yes, sir. That's our first day.
That would have your first class on the 29th.
Yes.
Gonna be some Tylenol that week. Okay.
Well, we go back on the 11th, so have fun.
Good.
We go back on the 9th.
Okay. Well, the 9th of August.
Yes.
Okay.
So just look that date up because
I
that's
will
what
double check, Nadine, but I appreciate that. So it's the week of the 28th when the fall semester starts. Now,
if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Now, whoever you have for 603 may realize if they still have their feet, I feel like Casey Kasem, where you can reach for the stars, but keep your feet on the ground. They may determine that, maybe they need a 3 or 4 days of letting things settle, get the school year started, and we'll start the following Tuesday, which would be in September. They have the, whatever your ability, authority, they can wiggle that date, that first start date. And that probably is, if school starts for the majority of you on that Monday, I doubt that y'all going to be real happy about jumping on a computer and another course on that very first Tuesday. That's just my perspective. Okay, tonight I want to talk about chapter 11 and 12. And the reason that these two were interesting, chapter 11 is the type of research that you do in your school as you're preparing for most of you wanting to improve test scores and stuff like that. Chapter 12 is stuff that you will not be doing because you're comparing. Is Kevin McRae riding through a drive-through?
He might be working. He working in between.
Hey, my window was down, man. I got a little part-time job, man, that I'm on the way to right now. I do apologize.
Kevin. Kevin.
We gotta pay this luxury tax at Gardner Webb, man. This is like $1,000 a month. I gotta work.
Lord help. Okay, well, I didn't know what wind was blowing through the car. So chapter 11, no problem. Chapter 11 talks about the type of research and process you're working under. Chapter 12 talks about the process and research that you do not work under. How would you like it if they took your classroom, which was heterogeneous, boys and girls and all different races, and said, okay, this is chapter 12, and we'll come back to it in more detail. You people on the first 3 rows on the left, we're going to help you after school to raise test scores. You people on the first 3 rows on the right, you're not getting help, and you just going to take it like it is. Now, how would you think that'd go over in a school? With one group gets a treatment and another group gets nothing. No. It doesn't work like that, and we'll cover the experimental research last. But what we typically do in schools is what they call correlational research. In English, break that first word down is, if you do this, does it have a relationship to any of the outcomes that you might get? Well, obviously, in most cases, it does. They typically tell you in chapter 11, you want to talk about the importance of the study, the research question or hypothesis, and y'all are way past that, the variables of interest, and any relevant literature. What do you think you've been looking up for the past 2 or 3 or 5 or so weeks? The literature in that group. You also have to select a sample size. Most of you have taken a whole group. Most of you have taken an entire grade level. Most of you have taken a whole batch, but they're all of one sample size. And that sample size is supposed to represent the population of that group. So if you took all of 3rd grade, you're thinking, okay, in Wake County, this would be all the 3rd graders in a regular class, and we're going to do a study of doing something for this batch of 3rd graders at your school, and how will that affect other 3rd graders in that school system? So it's a way to judge that. After you apply your treatment, and I think some of you doing study groups, pull-outs, if you're doing team instruction to other teachers who are not involved directly with that subject matter, they're also teaching that kind of stuff. So after everybody puts in their process, then you're going to summarize your findings. Either the test scores went up, they stayed at 0, or heaven forbid they go down or digress. Then you would look at anything that altered the flaws, what could have gone wrong that the students were not aware of or the teachers were not aware of. And then the last one that's the most important, in my opinion, is if you've got a study where you've made some progress and you've done some research and it has worked out well, what would you do next to use that study for further research? And a lot of ways in education, researchers will do something, they'll add to it, then someone will come along and do another study and add to that. That's typically what researchers do in education. I believe I did make this statement one time, that in education, we very seldom do something brand new. We keep researching what has already been researched to see if any changes. Now, things obviously have changed. It'd be a great time to do research on students who've been affected by their mothers or fathers who've gone to war. I don't think we've studied that in depth. The opioid crisis or the other kind of illnesses in our country, how has that affected the increasing studies of population of poverty on children to the extent that it is today? I mean, there's still some new areas to look at, but we typically study the same stuff that we've studied before, but we're going to add to it a little bit and see how it. Now, make note of these 3 pages. On pages 263, 264, and 265. There are 3, I'm going to go over those again. There are 3 examples, 3 excellent examples of correlational research projects. If you haven't read them, back up, look in the book, and go take another look at those. 263, 264, and 265. Those are real good ones. And one of them actually affects you. What does it take to keep a teacher teaching? I don't know if it was a North Carolina study, but this won't affect any of you. But if you were a new teacher now that they've decided that, I think starting in 2020, if no changes are made to the state statute, when you retire, you'll get no benefits. How's that? Let's go through that one more time. If you are a new teacher. Now, y'all, first of all, if you have been vested, now you write that word down. That means you started before 1985. Okay? If you have been vested in the state, that means when you retire. Now, if you've come in from another outside within North Carolina or even outside of North Carolina from another state and you transfer your years of service, that's the same thing. But if you have been on board before 85, you are vested in our retirement system. What that means is when you do retire, you will not pay any state tax on your retirement. Did you know that one? Okay, y'all listen. I realize I got a group that's somewhere in the 20-year plus of experience where you've been involved in education, and then I'm now thinking that most of you are in the 15 or less band. But the critical piece that I'm getting ready to tell you now is if you're not employed before 12/20, when you retire, you are going to walk out with no health benefits. You may be on Trump Care, Clinton Care, Obamacare, or something else. And well, here's the question. What kind of a drawing card is that for coming to North Carolina if they go? There was a big expose. I know you don't get up early on Sunday morning, but you can DVR this. It's called NC Spin. Anybody ever watch that program? Okay. They get these old heads out of Raleigh who talk about the stuff that they've messed up with the legislative group every Sunday. And Sunday they were talking about passing that law, and one of them said in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the incentive was, and people coming on to board to work, they had to make a discussion. A, we'd rather have our benefits and money after we retire versus when we come to work, we want our money and benefits now. Well, evidently we can't carry as many as we are carrying in the retirement process for health and the retirement system, so they're making some changes to make it still solvent. You might, depending on where you are in your career, things have changed, and unless within the next 2 or so years they make an adjustment on that state statute, some of these new people are not going to get benefits when they retire. And that's sad. It's not, people are not going to come to work if they don't have something when they put in 25 or 30 years. What's the incentive to stay? And that's just not teachers. It's any state employee. Does that bother any of you? It should. Nadine, if you don't mind me asking, how many years of service in the state?
So in the state, I'm at, I think 10 in the state.
Okay. And what kind of credit did they give you for service outside?
So that was part of it. I have about 15 total.
Okay. Well, you're on the plus side of this whole process. For those people who are working in the state now, you're still on the plus side for retirement benefits, and 2, health insurance. Now, you may not think that's a big deal, but look at all these other people who have no health insurance. I don't know. It bothers me that they make up these things and they're thinking 15, 20, 30 years down the road. How many of you still have vacancies at your school that you never were able to fill this school year, that you used a long-term sub? Well, guess what? You're going to start out using a sub long-term in August. People are not out there. There's not a drawing card to get them to come on board, and they're thinking, this is not working for me. I'm not liking this. So at least you're in the pipeline and you got a process. You might want to start Googling some of this kind of mess to see where you are with benefits, extended kind of stuff, and like that. It just bothers me. Maybe I think too much. As an old head, we tend to worry more about what's going to happen to us after things go and whatever. But and depending on, and Nadine, for your benefit, you may not realize that you're in that service band who got the heaviest raise from the legislature. Those in the middle got to pay out this time over 2 years. You definitely want to think about getting an administrative job because the principal's got 18% over 2 years. The AP's got 10 over 2 years. Administrators haven't had a raise like that since 2010. I thought someone had lost their mind when I heard that one. 18%. They're already at the highest salary band in the state, and now we're giving them 18% over 2 years. Anyway, you got to get out of the classroom and get over into the administrative side is what I'm trying to converse you.
I'm sorry, what was the range? What was it, like 10 to 15 or something like that?
I think it was, Nadine. They got the bulk this time. You remember during the last biennial sessions, they gave the young ones, I don't mean the least experienced, they got the bulk. But now now I will tell you this, you people who are approaching 20 to 25 years of service, my guess is you got the least. Because you're already making so much. I think in theory, when you get close to 55, now keep in mind, I'm talking the state side of your salary, not the local supplement. If you're in Halifax County, you're making a world of difference of money than you are, world less than you are in Wake, Guilford, Winston, or Charlotte. Because the local supplement just takes it off the roof. But the bottom line is this. And then here's what I don't understand. Even the old heads, the retirees like me, they gave us 1%. I'm thinking, for what? What did I do? Ride by school and help some kid read after I've retired, or help a group of third graders do math or whatever? Anyway, let me get off my soapbox so we can cover chapter 12. How about that? All right. Chapter 12 is the type of research that we don't do because we have control groups. Like I said earlier, you got children in rows 1, 2, and 3. They're going to get a treatment, extra help, extra this, extra that. And those in rows 4, 5, and 6, you're not going to get anything. You're going to get on the bus when it's time to go home. Now, you and I both know that is so illogical and unfair. That's why they've had to install security systems and cameras and locks on the school doors because the parents would come out there and go berserk. That's just not right. So we don't do that in education. We'll do a whole group that represents the group. All third grade is compared to all third graders in that service band across your school or another school. But experimental research is what we do not use. And a lot of you are doing things where you're doing test scores. So if you have not, there are 3, again, I'm going to give you some page numbers. I want you to go back. There are 3 examples of experimental research. What would be a good example of experimental research if you were in the field of medicine? And some of you may have been in this.
Like giving a cancer patient the real treatment versus.
Excellent. And someone getting a placebo. That's correct, Stephanie. And that goes on all the time. And then when they call it a blind study, and I'm giving you some more knowledge, when they give you a double-blind study. And what that means in English is the person administering the tests, medicine, and all that stuff, that person doesn't know whether you're getting the placebo or the real medicine. Only the person sitting behind that locked door knows that patient 32, what they got, or patient 56, what they got. So the patient never knows what they're getting, be it the medicine or the placebo. If the one doing the research doesn't know, that's when it's referred to as a double-blind study. Absolutely, we don't do that insanity in education. That's only in like the field of medicine. But on these 3 pages, I want you to stop, go back, and take a second and look this over. If you would, on page 298, 299, and 300. Those are 3 examples of experimental research. And obviously, we don't do that in studies of education. Okay, now, what I need to do, I want to double check to make sure the fall semester starts when?
The 28th.
The 28th, but I told Nadine I'd double check. I want you to go back and look at your spreadsheet from left to right to see that you have something, a number in all 19 of those chapters. I've done 4. If you can, do the other 15. Get your 4 Zooms, get your 4 writtens. You've done your city training and you did your EVA. So the only thing is left is your APTEL. And I will send Dr. Neal an email asking him, worst case scenario, what do I do? This is your first summer session where it was only 10 weeks. And I warned you about that early on, but it just makes me nervous with 23 days left. I worry more than I probably should. That's why I got gray hair. But anyway, what questions have you got now? When you get to 100 points, and one of you does have 100 points, stop. There's nothing else for you to do. You've earned your grade, which is an A. Should I post? Do you know what the grading scale is at the university? For an A, then I think it drops to a B, B plus, or A minus. I'll post a grading scale when I send you out this email from Dr. Neal. But when you get to 100, you can't. There's no number higher than that. So there's nothing else for you to do. Come join us on Tuesdays. I might embarrass you and ask you a question. But other than that, you're through with putting your work in. Everything's finished. And that's definitely an A. That's the highest grade that they issue per semester is an A. There's no A plus. Okay? Question. Yes, I did hit the record button again. Now, you notice that we haven't faded out and gone somewhere and then we woke up and came back tonight. I'm glad you asked. I have several computers and a smartphone that are tied to my modem. So what I did was I disconnected the tabletop computer and I shut down the smartphone, so the only signal that's feeding this group is on this laptop. You know, it's all about trying to figure out where you are, what you need to do, think about what changes need to occur. Would you do this all over again? Would you have done it sooner? And the answer is yes. I didn't realize drawing those 2 or 3 different sources would lower my rate to a point where we would just fade out during class, then wait a couple of minutes and come back. But it worked out. Okay, I'm glad to hear you got some groups set up coming back. As you put up stuff, I will start making sure, now that I've corrected all that stuff, that you've been given credit for everything that you've done for a written peer review or a Zoom. You may put it up and I see 4 or 5 things there, and I will give you credit back to that. But the critical piece right now, and I can't stress this as enough, is for you to focus on completing your APTEL with those 4 tasks and moving it with your clinical coach's permission. If that person says it looks good, what are your peer reviewers saying, this or that, or they give you the final, it looks good, go ahead and let's submit for an evaluation, then you need to move that on. And like we talked about, Nicole, I think if, what did I say, around the 28th, the 25th, somewhere in there, they need about 5 days because they're supposed to take, I'm worried if one of these people, if you send it in and they only have 5 days to look at it, they take 3, but they send it back and go, we need you to change this, this, and this. I don't want you to go into a tailspin and go, I got 2 days to make all these changes, if there are any changes. But I don't like for you to get something back from them late and then you have to get crazy trying to fix things. But as a stopgap measure, if your writing has been good all along, if your written reviews have been good, if your Zoom reviews have been good in your discussions and things like that, there shouldn't be a surprise from your clinical coach, should there? No. It's basically you're self-analyzing and self-grading your work before it gets off of your computer, before it gets to your clinical coach's computer. There shouldn't be any surprises at that point. But just in case there is, I always worry about, you send it to them, they take their 5 days or 3 days or 4 days, and something needs to come back for an adjustment. How bad does that put you in a tailspin? And that's the part that worries me the most. Okay, unless something happens, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you right now, likelihood of class next week, I may go ahead and cover the next 2 chapters, 13 and 14. I may go ahead and do my own Zoom activities and talk to you about this or talk to you about that, and then post that somewhere between 11 and 12 on Tuesday. I may have to sort of take in another activity Tuesday afternoon, and I don't know if I'm going to get back settled and refocused by 7:30. So if I'll either send you an email and said, no problem, things have changed, I'll see y'all at 7:30, or here's the Zoom video that I prepared on Monday just in case. Watch that on Tuesday and I'll see you on the next day. As always, I'm going to leave you with this question. If you have a question, you have my phone number. If anybody answers my phone, call the police in Rowan County. I have been abducted. Somebody's kicked in the door. I'm being robbed. I'm the only one at that phone number. But you call me if I'm not here, tell me who you are, and repeat the phone number, and I'll call you back. If you want me to email you back and forth, send me an email. I'll email you back or say, why don't we talk, or Zoom, or whatever. Now is not the time for you to treat me like a stepchild. We need to be tight for the next 23 days. Don't become a stranger. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Shake your head up and down. I know you can hear me. I know you can hear me. Keep connected for sure over the next 23 days. With that, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye.